Mike Bohn and Nolan King for MMA Junkie here on May 23rd, 2024, reacting to some recent breaking news. PFL announces today that they have released former champion Gegard Mousasi from his Bellator contract. This has seemingly been brewing for a little bit now. Over a month ago, Mousasi came out to me and did an interview where he vented all sorts of frustrations with his place in PFL / Bellator, said he wasn't getting fights. They had no intention of honoring his contract because he felt he was being paid too much. He's done much more interviews since then. We've heard Ray Sefo speak on it, Don Davis somewhat speak on it. They kind of essentially claimed, well, Ray Sefo did, that he was offered some fights and, you know, it was going to be handled. Don Davis did an interview on the Weighing In podcast, I believe on Wednesday, and said that all these issues will be resolved very confidently. And then we get this news today, Nolan. I guess your first reaction to this, are you surprised? Did you think it would end differently? Just give me your thoughts on the announcement of this release for Gegard Mousasi.
I mean, if you look at it in the last 48 hours or so, Mousasi's comments on Ariel's show about taking legal action and some of maybe the more intense comments that we've heard from him, it seems like his frustration's really grown over time. So for it to kind of boil up like that, if you've taken the last 48 hours, I'm not necessarily surprised that it's come to this after the way that things have played out. But yeah, I mean, it's surprising that the merger has resulted in this, right? Like, I think we've heard a lot of different frustrations from some of the fighters. Right now, is it a question of, some of the merger pains? Is it just trying to figure everything out? Is this something that's going to continue going forward? Is it just something that is inherently within the PFL structure? So there's a lot of questions here about how things will be going forward. Is this the worst of it? Is this, I wouldn't say it's an isolated incident, because we've heard Douglas Lima say something similar in recent days. So I can't really say I'm necessarily surprised after what I heard yesterday, but it seemed like Don Davis, from some of the stuff he was saying publicly, was in a little bit, he was not damage control, but he was saying stuff that would make me think that they were going to do their best to resolve it. And so for them to just kind of sever ties like this, I guess did catch me off guard a little bit. But after Gegard, what he said yesterday, I can't be totally shocked by it.
Yeah, I mean, he did say if it was up to him that he would, wish he would be released so he could move on. But, his team had other ideas. And speaking of his team, I, briefly exchanged messages with his manager, Nima Safapur, after this, and he issued a statement, which we can pull up right now. We will not comment on the merits of the alleged release at this time for obvious reasons. However, we believe there is a greater lesson here that our community should pay close attention to. For an organization that repeatedly claims to be fighter first, we truly know how PFL treats their legends, treats their fighters, especially their legends, end quote. I guess for that, Nolan, that seems to be kind of the discussion here, right? As far as like what kind of happens coming off this and the viewing of PFL, right? Like, that's what they said when they took this over. That's always been the merit, like fighters first. But it does seem like there's some issues that are kind of not aligning with that mission statement for them. So when you see Nima's statement there, talk about the people like Douglas Lima, we've seen Chris Cyborg's frustration. Even Larissa Pacheco kind of came out and said it's radio silence on the PFL side. I think we can say, like, right here up front, everyone in the industry should want PFL to do well, right? Like, I think competition is good for the sport. Like, we want all this to succeed. So we're not sitting here like trying to wish on their downfall or anything in that sense. But as people who cover the sport and trying to look at this like unbiasedly and stuff, these red flags that continue to come up, what are they saying to you?
Well, it's tough, right? Because I hate to put everything under the same umbrella and kind of speak about all these things so widely, because I don't think we know necessarily all the details of all of them. But I will say, in a day and age where social media voices are really loud, where I think reputation in the industry is very important, for all these things to come up at the same time, and we see the comments and some of the stories that we've written, and even with this, it seems like it's not the best PR, obviously, for PFL to kind of come out as the alternative to the UFC, the fighter-friendly organization, and then to have what appears to be to the public just a lot of different issues going on with some of their biggest stars. So I think one way or the other, the appearance of this is bad. Now, if we peel back the layers to each individual, instance and what exactly was going on, I think that's really important, not to kind of just blanket everything. So I'll be interested to hear from Mousasi when he does speak about this. I mean, I thought it was interesting in the statement you just brought up, and we talked about this earlier, that Nima used the word alleged. So is there going to be more legal action? Do they feel like they were wrong somewhere? Do they feel like they were owed a fight? Do they feel like somehow they weren't actually cut from the roster? So again, more details, more transparency, more clarity on the situation. We'll be able to figure out if it's a trend or just more isolated vocal incidents that have occurred kind of all at the same time.
For sure. And I guess focusing on like Mousasi's situation, because that's the most pressing one here. It does seem like, he was signed to maybe a new deal in the late stages of Bellator's previous ownership existence. And that seems to be where maybe some of the dispute came in, as far as like, everything that kind of came to that. But PFL is doing a merger and they're doing a big takeover. You should be doing your due diligence if they do claim that, some of the stuff was maybe not as well known to them during the vetting process. So to me, I mean, it just shows that they need to be much more, on top of the things that's going on. And if you made an obligation to buy this company, someone like Gegard Mousasi, I think, is definitely deserved and owed everything he's fought for over this huge career. And I mean, some of the things here just don't really add up or make sense, right? You look at Douglas Lima's situation as well, and he can't get a fight. He beat Costello Valenstinas the last time he's fought pretty much a year ago, and now Costello just fought for the first time since then and got a number one contender fight, winning his fight over there. So it just doesn't seem like everyone is getting, I don't know, like the straight answers from this company or what they feel.
And I will say too, like I think it speaks a little bit to the industry as a whole too, just with the way the fighters' contracts are structured, right? Because you look at guys like Mousasi and Lima, right? They get brought over from Bellator to PFL regime. If PFL looks at their contracts and says, "Oh, we're paying these guys that are kind of older, that have had some losses, we're paying them a lot of money," what's the alternative, right? They could cut them. And if you're Lima or Mousasi, where do you go after that, right? Like, I don't think the UFC is necessarily interested. I mean, maybe there's for Mousasi, there's some sort of boxing opportunity out there or something, right? But I guess in a certain way, it's like it's a difficult line to walk, right? Because the alternative is, the fighters don't have any leverage. The promotion has the leverage where they can sever you at all times. This isn't like other sports where you sign a contract. We see it in the NBA or NHL, right? Somebody signs a big contract and maybe they don't perform and they still get paid. They don't get their incentives and stuff, but they still get a solid amount of money. You see fans all the time talking about overplaying, or somebody's overpaying, or somebody's not playing up to what they're getting paid. So with this, it's a little different where, if they can just cut you whenever they want, like, they're always going to have that leverage when they think that the market doesn't value you, that you can't get an offer anywhere and that you're not going to walk. So, or that you care to stay on the roster. I guess you can't even walk anyways. But so it's a little bit of a weird scenario. You talked about how competition's good, and I think it is, but I also think MMA's marketplace right now is still just like two major players. One's massive, the other one's trying to get on a similar level, and then there's obviously all the other kind of outside the box combat sports opportunities that pop up, whether it's Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal's undercard, or Gamebred, bare knuckle MMA, or some of the other things that may arise. But it's not a guaranteed thing to explore free agency. In fact, I would kind of almost argue it's pretty treacherous waters. It's almost impossible to find something else outside of these two that's going to pay you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess a few more things before we get out of here, but I guess maybe just to kind of clarify some of the timeline things. Like, people who are watching this may ask, like, why didn't they just release him right away when he started to have this grievance? If they weren't gonna give him the fights or whatever the case may be, if they could have done this now, why couldn't they have done this a month plus ago? And I think that would be an interesting question to ask Don Davis. And I see people responding on Twitter, and it has been said publicly, like, were fight offers actually made to Mousasi? I know that they tried to get him to fight Derek Brunson on the Saudi card at 205 and on pretty relatively short notice. And it seems like Mousasi's team doesn't feel like, that is a good faith offer, more or less, to kind of do it under that circumstances. So PFL will probably say we did make him offers and he didn't like them. And, Mousasi's team and himself feels like they weren't legitimate offers. So I don't know where the middle ground is there. I mean, we hear this stuff with UFC as well too, right? Like, someone has a fight or two left on their contract and they offer them an undesirable matchup and an undesirable time. And if you turn it down, your contract extends or like whatever terms are. So there's games that promoters do play in the sport as a whole across the board. But I guess, I don't know, do you have any like kind of thoughts on that element of this whole thing?
No, I mean, like I just kind of said, I kind of think that it's the structure of a lot of these contracts work against the fighters to a certain degree. So it's not, it's hard to tell. You look at something like what Nemo was saying. Well, I think he gave you a statement after Ray Sefo spoke in Chicago about saying that they offered Mousasi that fight against Derek Brunson. And he was saying, well, that's not really a real offer. Short notice, was up a weight class. Like, what is a real offer? Did they just call him up on the phone and say, hey, is he interested in this? And then that's considered one of the fights that they offered him? Does it have to be in writing? Like, what kind of terms does it even clarify in a contract? So there's so many different elements of this. A lot of it, I think we kind of get a good feel for just from kind of hearing about so many different instances of different contract issues that fighters have with promotions. I mean, we've seen different copies of contracts and whatnot, but it's a bit of a game. And I think the game in general across the industry, I mean, this isn't breaking news as much as Mousasi leaving or getting cut is breaking news. This isn't, which is that, these contracts are pretty restrictive. And I think the promotions just have an ultimate amount of leverage regardless of the fighter.
For sure. And, going off that, I think the thing that to take away is if they are going to sign these fighters to the extremely restrictive, more or less one-sided contracts, how about we honor them? Like, you inherited that deal from Mousasi. I do feel like he should have been, paid, and all these other people out there who are asking for fights and all that stuff, they need to figure it out, because stories like this, again, as I said earlier, we don't want PFL's downfall. I think if they weren't here, it would be very bad for the industry to have the UFC as like the sole significant entity. So I hope lessons can be learned from this and whatever the case may be. But as far as Mousasi, we kind of alluded to it earlier with the Nima statement, like kind of hinting this may not be over in that sense. I don't know if that means, while that process plays out, Mousasi is still going to be on the bench, or if he can book a fight while this goes on tomorrow and do something else. But I guess let's assume it's the latter and he's a free man and can do whatever. Is there anything out there that you personally, Nolan King, is like the MMA fan or your boxing fan, Mousasi supporter, whatever, would want to see him do that comes to top of mind?
I mean, that's the thing, like looking at him and what he's accomplished, I don't know where he could go that would have a level of interest, except if he were to, I hate to say it, but if you were to box Jake Paul, they're the similar size, another MMA name, somebody that I think the MMA community has faith in his abilities. I don't know if that's something Gegard would be interested in. I don't know if from Jake's perspective, fighting somebody that's maybe very highly thought of to the diehards, but maybe doesn't have that appeal outside of the MMA bubble as much as a Nate or an Anderson does, or somebody like that. Maybe that wouldn't appeal to him, but hopefully there are options out there. Maybe there's some sort of kickboxing options over in Europe that might play up to that crowd a little bit more. But there's nothing necessarily that totally like jumps off the page at me. And that's, I think, again, kind of the unfortunate thing about, the combat sports world pertinent to MMA right now.
Yeah. Give me Mousasi versus Luke Rockhold in karate combat.
I'd watch it. Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll leave it there. The story will obviously continue to develop over time. We'll be covering it here on the YouTube channel, on the site, everything like that. So I continue to follow the coverage there. And, this is an interesting step today as this kind of PFL merger with Bellator continues to unravel and the future of that organization gets shown. So thanks everyone for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.